Is it getting late in your draft and you can tell you are struggling for home runs or batting average? Well, don't worry. We've got 20 names here to help you out on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Welcome, everybody, to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast presented by Fantrax, the Saturday edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast on a Sunday. Thank you, Ryan, for the flexibility here. I was out yesterday at the Glarf draft in Detroit. Pretty fun draft, which I'll be breaking down with Lucas Beery on Thursday's episode. But Ryan, what have you been up to this weekend? Have you been enjoying the spring games or mostly just hoping your guys don't get hurt?
A little bit of mix of both. It feels good to be at this time of the year. Honestly, I was tweeting earlier that it feels makes me happy just to see so many lineup cards being tweeted out on my timeline. That's just a good feeling, even though a lot of them have a handful of guys that the average fan probably hasn't heard of, but exciting time of the year, spring training just getting underway.
Yeah, for sure. This time of year, we have a whole bunch of players throwing really hard and looking like they're in the best shape of their life coming back from injury. We've also got players getting hurt. We're going to talk about both of those in the headline portion of today's show. Before we move on to the main topic, which is sleepers or mid to late round picks for home runs and for batting average, our favorite options for those two categories after pick 150. But the headlines, first of all, we are tracking the Wyatt Langford oblique strain. Suffered a couple days ago. He's being held out of baseball activities for 5 to 7 days. So I guess that's about 3 to 5 more days from today. Well, if he gets going on baseball activities by March 1st, still seems like he should have plenty of time to be fully ramped up by opening day. And we know tons of players have minor issues early in camp and end up being just fine. But if you're drafting right now, are you worried about this? Would you be not taking a chance on Langford, even if you were previously somewhat interested? Are you moving him down at least a round or so, letting somebody else take that risk, or are you keeping the faith?
Yeah, honestly, I would prefer that he be shut down for a little bit longer than 5 to 7 days. That doesn't feel long enough to me. Even though they say it's a quote unquote mild oblique strain, as we know, those injuries have a tendency to linger, and also you can have a setback with it. I mean, I think it serves at this point, hopefully, as someone who would like to roster Wyatt Langford, hopefully it serves to drive his price down just a little bit, maybe to where it should be anyway. He's probably going a little too early, even as someone who is a big fan of. He was, I think I mentioned him in our guys we've been rostering podcast, or maybe that was something else I'm thinking of. But I am a huge Wyatt Langford stan. Hopefully his ADP will be a little bit more palatable after this, and he can get past the oblique injury.
Yeah, if it does turn out to be something more serious, those obliques can often be, a 6-week, a 2-month injury. So that certainly that is a possibility here. We also should mention the fact that Langford missed some time with a muscle injury last year. It was a hamstring that time. So not, if it was another hamstring this year, I think I'd be more worried saying, does he just have bad hamstrings? Right now, the storyline would be, well, maybe he tends to hurt all of his muscles, which is, would be a problem if that turns out to be the case. But I don't know if it counts as a trend yet. Hopefully in a week or so, we'll be having positive updates on Wyatt Langford. Another early round exciting outfielder dealing with some sort of minor injury is Jarren Duran of the Red Sox, managing calf soreness. He was scratched from today's Grapefruit League lineup. Calf soreness, I mean, as long as the word stays nothing worse than soreness, I think we probably don't need to move Duran too much. I guess if you're drafting literally today, though, is it worth bumping him down at all, or are you not worried?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would probably give you pause just seeing that little red denotation next to his player news profile in your draft room, probably give you a little pause in and of itself. Hopefully it is, as you mentioned, though, just a couple day thing. It's something that just bears watching over the next couple days. If he does not return to action and they keep pushing it back, then it will be time to worry. But I think at this juncture, you can probably pretty much draft him where you'd normally draft him.
All right, fair enough. I think that sounds right to me, as long as it stays soreness. Soreness is just not that bad. He should have plenty of time to make it back. Seems like the kind of issue that would lead you being scratched in a Grapefruit League game, but not necessarily a regular season game. It's not just negative news, though. This time of year, we also saw Sandy Alcantara make it back from Tommy John surgery and look like himself. He touched 99 with his fastball in his first spring start today. Allowed one hit, struck out one in a scoreless inning against the Mets. Are you a Sandy Alcantara guy, and are you a little bit more willing to be a Sandy Alcantara guy now that we're seeing right away at the start of spring he looks ready to go?
I think it depends on what or if we hear more about what his potential workload is going to look like this season. I know Craig Mish, who's pretty plugged into all things Marlins, has mentioned he does not expect Alcantara to have workload restrictions this season. That would be a surprise to me if he has no form of workload restriction. And the thing about Alcantara is, as good as he does, especially in the strikeout department, need that volume to not fall behind the big strikeout guys. So if he gets to 200 innings, his strikeout level should be fine if he keeps it around an inning or even a little below a strikeout per inning. But, I mean, if he's more at 170, 180, then he could be a little bit of a liability in the strikeouts department, even as good as he is. I have no real worry about performance from Sandy Alcantara. I think he's going to be as good as he has been. Today was certainly an encouraging step in the right direction as well. But again, what does that workload look like? Because he does need that bulk to not fall behind too far in the strikeout department.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've always been a Sandy Alcantara avoider when he was going early in drafts, because I tend to avoid the fantasy aces who don't give you ace strikeout numbers. I just don't want to start behind everybody else in the most predictable category for a pitcher, even if Alcantara is good at other things. But a pitcher with his profile going at pick 172, which is where he's been going in February NFBC drafts. I mean, you don't need ace-level strikeout numbers for a pitcher there. You just have to believe that the workload will be there. I'm just looking at some of the other pitchers going in the Alcantara range in the month of February. We got Reynaldo Lopez and Yusei Kikuchi a couple spots in front of him. Kevin Gossman and Robbie Ray a few spots behind him. So no sure things in that range. So if you are an Alcantara believer and you are reassured by his 99 mile per hour on this first spring start, the price does seem fair enough to me, right? You're really not paying up for any certainty or any ace-like numbers in that price range.
Yeah, interesting that those are the names that are around him too, because they, as you mentioned, all guys with kind of some question marks, but those are all a lot of high strikeout guys with less certainty from whether it's health or just general performance. So it maybe just boil down to what your preference is in that range, whether you go with a more bankable guy like an Alcantara in that range who might not give you the big strikeout numbers, or you want to gamble on Robbie Ray striking out 250 guys again. Just kind of depends on what your preference is and your team build up to that point.
All right, we've got more news to touch on in the intro here. Mike Clevinger, who signed with the White Sox on a minor league deal a few days ago. Recent reports came out suggesting that the White Sox are considering using him in a late inning relief role. I mean, who are the other relief options for the White Sox right now? Just looking at who we have projected as potential closers: Justin Anderson, Prelander Baroa, and Fraser Ellard. Not exactly big names, I would say. Mike Clevinger doesn't seem to have all that much, though, at this stage in his career, but you don't need to have all that much to be one of the best pitchers on the White Sox. Do you think that Mike Clevenger is worth even a reserve round pick as a closer spec? I don't know if I can talk myself into it, but maybe. Do you want to give it a shot?
Yeah, I did not expect to be talking about Mike Clevenger on our news portion on February 23rd, or frankly at any point in 2025. I mean, as you mentioned, like it's not that like they're teaming with options. And Perlander Baroa got hurt, by the way. He's got I think a grade 1 elbow strain. So cross him off the list, at least for a while, for potential closer options for the White Sox. And I think they did mention that Clevenger was a closer in college at one point. Don't know how relevant that is at this point, but I mean, it's just such a low probability of happening. And also he's on the White Sox that I don't know that we really need to be paying attention to it. But hey, if you got a 50-round draft and hold slow draft going right now, and you're on the clock in round 49, I mean, you're basically just throwing darts at that point. So maybe you throw one at Mike Clevenger.
Not to stick on the White Sox closer for too long, but there is another ex-Cleveland pitcher on a minor league deal with this team, and that's James Karinchak. He, to me, seems more like someone who looks like a closer. I mean, He's always been this very wild but very high strikeout pitcher. He missed all of last year dealing with shoulder issues. I mean, if I'm throwing a dart at somebody in the 45th round, would it be Clevenger for you? Would it be Karinchak? I don't know. I'm more interested, I think, in Karinchak, somebody who can strike out a third of batters and walk half that many, rather than Clevenger, who's had a below-average strikeout rate for several seasons and is now in his mid-30s.
Yeah, I think Karinchak is probably a better dart throw. As you mentioned, he's had injury issues of his own, like Clevenger. He's also Karinchak, since they cracked down on the sticky substance thing. I know he's seen his spin rates go down quite a bit.
Good point. Yeah.
So maybe he's not quite as bat missy as he used to be. But again, it's not a difficult late inning mix to crack. So if you're in a super deep league, sure, why not throw a dart at James Karinchak?
Yeah, the leader in saves for the White Sox this season will probably have something like 12. So I think we should move on. We've already denoted enough time for the year to that situation. One more headline to talk about here before we move into the home run and average sleepers. Nolan Arenado, the talks to send him to the Astros have restarted. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Haven't the Astros gotten pieces into place now? They have Isaac Paredes to play third base. I guess could Paredes move to second or something? I don't understand this one, but it seems to be at least somewhat real. What's your thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if they were gonna bring back Bregman and move Altuve to left field, that Paredes was gonna play second base in that instance. So that would be just kind of a different version of that. It is strange. Certainly, I did not expect those talks to rekindle. I know we've seen it was a report from 3 different guys and from MLB.com that they re-engaged in talks, and there was since a report from The Athletic that said yes, talks were brought back up, but there's no imminent move or no momentum right now for any deal. And it also said that Arenado had not yet changed his mind as far as approving a trade to the Astros, even though they were on his initial 5-team list or whatever. It seems odd to me that Mozeliak, the president of baseball operations for the Cardinals, would even go down that road unless he knew that Arenado would approve it this time. I don't think he wanted to get to the 1 yard line or whatever they called it before and, lose out on the deal again because Arenado said no, but just something to keep an eye on. It would be an ideal landing spot for Arenado going to that ballpark with his swing. But for now, just an interesting little tidbit to track.
Yeah, Arenado with that similar profile to Isaac Paredes and Alex Bregman, guys who hit way more homers than you'd expect given their hard hit rates. Well, I guess not necessarily last year. Arenado started falling off, but maybe he could arrest that slide if he does move to Houston, but it doesn't sound like such a move is about to happen. So I don't know if I'd be taking a shot on him just because of that or anything.
Yep.
Excuse me. Should we move on to our main topic of the day here, which is sleepers for home runs and batting average? We'll call them sleepers. Some of them are more mid-round picks. We're going everybody after pick 150. So maybe that's your last few guys in a shallower league, or the middle of your roster in a 15-team mixed league. Starting with home runs, Ryan, before we get into the names, what is the main thing you're looking for that defines a home run sleeper?
Well, I think it's mostly look at the bat at ball data. Maybe they deserved more home run production than what they actually got at their bottom line stats. Is it a player that hits the ball really hard, maybe hits it on the ground too much? If they could elevate that launch angle, they could produce more home runs. But really, it's just you're at the point of the draft, and these are players that are being taken currently in FBC drafts after pick 150 as of February 1st. It's really, you're just at that point in the draft. Do you feel like you need that bit of power? And these are guys that could provide it. So Heliot Ramos, first guy on my list, who I should mention, by the way, we talked about Wyatt Langford's oblique injury. Heliot Ramos actually has an oblique injury of his own, so that's something to track. Also seems like a relatively minor one, but that is one to keep tabs on if you're having your draft anytime soon. Ramos, the power has always been there. That's why he was a highly thought of prospect for a while, but never really showed up in games until last season. He hit 22 home runs in 121 games with the Giants, another 8 home runs in the minors for a total of 30 on the year. Also, his expected home run total was 24.8, so maybe he should have had a few more, but according to the metrics, as I mentioned, hits the ball really, really hard. 85th percentile, both in hard hit rate and average exit velocity, barrel rate, even better than that at 90 in the 92nd percentile. He's a guy who sprays the ball around a lot. If you look at his spray chart, hits it a lot to the opposite field, hits it a lot to center field. He would probably benefit, especially given where he plays, pulling the ball more often. That's not Oracle Park. It's not a great spot to be hitting the ball to center field and right field if you're a right-handed batter. If he could pull the bar more often, which he does have bat speed in the 90th percentile, so it's not as if he's not capable of getting around on fastballs. It's just maybe a timing mechanism if he can figure that out. He did struggle against righties last year, did a lot of his damage against lefties, but I think he's going to have a decent amount of leash this year, and certainly has 30-plus home run potential, and you can get him fairly late.
Yeah, one thing you didn't mention in what makes a good home run sleeper is a homer-friendly park, and I guess you didn't mention it because you were willing to take some sleepers on guys like Heliot Ramos. Obviously, being in San Francisco does hurt him, but he hits it hard enough to make up for it. I think if he was playing at a different park, it's possible that he wouldn't be eligible for this. Well, maybe not. He's going 196. I don't know if he'd jump into the 140s if he was somewhere else, but he certainly is hurt by that park, but that's why you can get him very cheap. That's why you can get him as, almost a sleeper, something like that. Somebody who does have a very homer-friendly park, though, well, a very hitter-friendly park above all else, is Michael Toglia of the Rockies. It's a very good place to hit, particularly for batting average, because the Rockies, in order to make the home run park factor not absolutely absurd, they give you a massive outfield, which allows a whole bunch of singles to fall in. The Rockies' Coors Field is actually just 8th in 3-year home run park factor, according to StatCast, but it's still pretty good. And Toglia doesn't need any help hitting the ball over the fence. He actually needs help with the batting average department. So it's actually probably pretty good for him that Coors Field is set up that way. Toglia only hit 218 last year, expected batting average of 244. It's a little bit better, but that's all because of Coors Field. He struck out 32% of the time, but he managed 25 homers in 116 games because he hits the ball incredibly hard, a 17.2% barrel rate. If we look at all players who came to the plate at least 450 times, that ranks sixth. The only players ahead of him, Aaron Judge, Shohei Ohtani, Giancarlo Stanton, Juan Soto, and Tyler O'Neill. So Michael Toglia, truly top of the scale power, I would say. He was 14th in hard hit rate as well. Hits the ball incredibly hard, doesn't hit it nearly often enough, but with Coors Field propping up that batting average, I think he can give you something a lot better than the 218 he managed this year. I think he will hurt you in batting average, but I don't think he'll kill you. And I think that he'll more than make up for it with his power. He even gave you 10 steals last year as well. I don't know how reliable that is, but man, if you can get a guy with a 17% barrel rate who plays half his games at Coors Field and he's going at pick 179, give me that every day. So I'll take Michael Toglia as my top home run sleeper here. Who's your number two guy?
I'm going to go with Josh Jung. Kind of throw out 2024, I think. He had a pair of wrist surgeries, fully healthy now in spring training. Go back to 2023, hit 23 home runs in 122 games as a rookie. Additional 3 more home runs during the Rangers postseason run. Like Ramos, hits the ball very hard, 82nd percentile in hard hit rate, 87th percentile exit velocity, barrel rate in the 77th percentile in 2023. And Globe Life Field, kind of an underrated park as far as home runs go, especially for righties, ranks 4th over the last 3 years for right-handed power. Josh Jung, not a well-rounded player. Doesn't draw a lot of walks, strikes out a decent amount. I don't know how good he is overall as far as the hitter goes, but I do believe in the power. I think he's in a favorable home park, and the Rangers lineup should bounce back to a certain degree. He is healthy now and looks like a pretty good value for where he's going.
Yeah, durability was also not something you mentioned in what makes a good home run sleeper. When we were talking about runs and RBI sleepers last week, it was very much about compilers, guys who are going to stay in the lineup every single game because you don't have that much control over whether or not you get an RBI or a homer. You just kind of need to be there and be pretty good, and those things happen. For these sleepers, I think you can definitely target some players who have some questionable durability, but if they do manage to play most of the time, they could really post huge home run totals. So I think Josh Jung is a good one there, as long as you get him late enough that the durability doesn't matter too much. Another guy going quite late, I don't know why he's going nearly this late, at pick 219 in the month of February, is Jorge Soler. Jorge Soler is a very consistent power bat, and I don't know why you can get him outside of pick 200. For 6 straight seasons, he's had a barrel rate of at least 12%. That's well above average pretty much all the time. The first of those seasons was the year he hit 48 homers, and when the ball was flying back in 2019 for the Royals. Since then, he's topped out at 36. He's had some years more in the 20s when he's missed a bit of time as well. But if Jorge Soler stays healthy for almost all the season, playing, I think, every day for the Angels, no reason not to. I think 25 to 30 homers should be pretty easy for him. He's a flawed player. He's not a great in batting average, but he doesn't strike out that much, at a 24 and 25% strikeout rate the last 2 years as well. So you'd think that there was some big flaw here for a guy with this much power to be going outside of pick 200. What is it? What am I missing with Jorge Soler? Is he just a pretty obvious, boring but solid power bat that you can get very late in your draft?
Yeah, I feel like maybe he's got a reputation as a high strikeout batting average killer, but I mean, his average the last couple of years in the 240, 250 range, that's fine for a guy who's potential to hit 30 plus home runs. I'm with you. I'm fine where he's going. Manager Ron Washington has already committed that Soler is going to hit in one of the top 3 spots in the Angels lineup. Seems obvious that the 3 holes probably where he's going to wind up behind Mike Trout for however many games Mike Trout plays, and Taylor Ward. So pretty good spot to be in for Jorge Soler. Another guy who I've mentioned on the podcast quite a bit already, I feel like, Brandon Lowe. But I still feel like people are in early drafts are undervaluing the impact it's going to be for the Rays going from Tropicana Field to Steinbrenner Field in Tampa. In addition to the same dimensions as Yankee Stadium, which that is good for a right-handed or a left-handed batter in particular. Also, the hot Florida weather had the highest home run park factor per Baseball America. Did George Steinbrenner Field in the Florida State League last year, and Brandon Lowe, proven power hitter. We know about that 39 home run season he had in 2019. Look at the last two seasons. I think he had 21 home runs each of the last 2 years, but per 162 game pace, don't expect him to play that many, but that pace was 31 home runs. He's a fly ball hitter. He's a pull hitter. Got a career barrel rate of 13.1%. Feel very confident that he's going to hit for a lot of power as long as he stays healthy. And the back issues he had dealt with were not an issue last year. He also played more against lefties down the stretch last season. He is on the Rays. I still suspect, especially against tougher lefties, he's not going to be in the lineup, but maybe it's not a full-on platoon. And certainly as a power bat where Brandon Lowe is going, he's a viable pick in that range.
Yeah, I've always been a Brandon Lowe fan, just thinking that, man, if you ever do get that year where he gives you 600 plate appearances, he could give you 39 homers like he did back in 2021, the only time he reached that threshold. He's never had more than 450 in any other season, but still managed 21 homers the last 2 years. I think where he's going in the draft, when you add in the better home park, like you mentioned, if he just is basically the same guy with a bit of a boost from his park, he's already a fine pick. And then if we do get to see him, with 550, 600 plate appearances, if the health cooperates and if he starts against lefties, which we currently project him to do, potential for big profit here with Brandon Lowe. My next guy, also a Tampa Bay Ray, so also going to enjoy a much better park than he had in the last 2 months of last season. That's Christopher Morel. Now, Christopher Morel was a big sleeper of mine last year, and it did not work out in any way, I have to say. But Christopher Morel, the reason I liked him is he did everything you want except for make enough contact. So already that's good for a home run sleepers episode. His career barrel rate is 12.6%. Heading into last year, he was coming off a year we had a 15.5% barrel rate and a 50% hard hit rate. That is the quality of batted ball data Morel is able to produce. I also remember looking at the swing speed, the bat speed leaderboards when they were first coming out, and it was, Giancarlo Stanton, Aaron Judge, and Christopher Morel was way up there. So he's capable of hitting the ball incredibly hard. He doesn't hit it nearly often enough, but in the early part of last year with the Cubs, he actually was cutting his strikeout rate. It was at quite low. It was at 31% last year. He was down near league average in the early part of last year, started trending up, but then after the move to Tampa, really spiked. He finished with 26% on the year, but just for this time with the Rays, it was 29.5%. So basically right where he was last year. So if he's still that guy again, then I'm pretty worried he's going to get raised. He's just going to play 3 times a week, whenever the Rays think he has a perfect matchup against the pitcher, if his bat path lines up with their arsenal or whatever, the Rays, they like to mix and match a ton. And he's exactly the kind of flawed player who you could see them mixing and matching. So I'm nowhere near as into Morel this year as I am last year. But for specifically this topic, if I'm in a situation where I need a home run sleeper, you can get Christopher Morel at pick 251 in February NFBC drafts, and I think he'll hit for power. He still managed 21 homers last year, even while hitting just 196. So I think you'll get that power, and maybe the player that I thought he was heading into last year should still be in there. He's still a very athletically talented guy who offers a whole lot. He just also has some real flaws. I don't know if the strengths are going to outperform the weaknesses, but I think the price is right to take a chance, particularly if you're trailing in power.
Yeah, I'm buying back in on Christopher Morel. I know we mentioned him a little bit in past podcasts as well. I'm just not sure he's that much different of a player than he was this time a year ago when a lot of people were excited to draft him. I know he didn't have a great year, but I think those skills are still there if he does get the playing time. Staying in the American League East for my next home run sleeper, we're going with Ryan Mountcastle. Baltimore is no more. They're bringing those fences in left field back in, not to the level it was when it was a very Homer happy venue, but certainly much more Homer friendly it should be than it was the last few years. And one of those players that could benefit most, I think, is Ryan Mountcastle. We've seen that home run total for Mountcastle go down in 4 straight years, but only have to go back to 2021 when he hit 33 home runs. He has admitted that he changed his approach somewhat to kind of suit his new left field wall. If you look at his spray chart, he used to be a guy who pulled it quite a bit, and that has gone down each of the last 4 years, along with his home run total. Maybe he reverts back to what he was before that. That would certainly behoove him and that home run potential. He's a guy who's always had plenty of power. I do think there are somewhat some playing time question marks with Mountcastle this year. I know the Orioles are talking up Heston Kjerstad as a potential to get pretty regular time between corner outfield spot, DH, maybe some first base. That could eat into Ryan Mountcastle's at bats if he gets off to a slow start. But I do think he's going to be pretty much an everyday guy initially. If he gets off to a good start, I think there's a chance he could return to that 30 home run level.
Yeah, I'm interested in a lot of Orioles this year with the park change. A lot of the Orioles hitters are, at least half a round more interesting, if not more, than they would have been otherwise. Just that crowded roster is fighting against that, but that keeps Mountcastle at a pretty affordable price. It looks like he's going pick 220 in the month of February, so not bad for the power potential he has. Somebody going 50 picks after that is my next guy, Matt Wallner of the Twins, a.k.a. Joey Gallo. I think they're incredibly similar at the plate, and I mean that as both a compliment and an insult. Matt Wallner, for his career, is striking out 35% of the time. It was 36% of the time last year. That is Gallo territory, and that doesn't really work unless you're producing the good version of Joey Gallo's barrel rates, and he's basically doing that. I guess Gallo had some seasons where he was even in the 20s, but Matt Wallner last year was at 17.5% across 75 games. The year before that, an 18.8% barrel rate. So there's no doubt about Matt Wallner's ability to make very good contact when he hits the ball. He doesn't hit it very often, but he still has managed a 251 batting average for his career, better than his expected batting average every year. But when you hit it that hard, you should expect an above average BABIP, probably not 359 like he's had. So I would think if Wallner plays more, he's going to hurt your batting average. But remember earlier I said Toglia was 6th in barrel rate if you drop the qualified hitter threshold to 450. If you drop it again to 250 so that you can see Matt Wallner, he shows up 5th there, just behind Judge, Ohtani, Stanton, and Soto. So a bat that hits the ball this hard and in the air all the time. He's got one of the higher launch angles as well, the 10th highest average launch angle out of the 324 hitters who came to the plate at least 250 times last year. All he does is swing for the fences, and he misses a lot. So your great uncle is going to be mad. Whatever old school baseball fans in your life are not going to like Matt Wallner. But if you're in a position where you need homers and not batting average, that's what he does. I guess there's some workload questions here. Just how often is he going to play? The Twins really like mixing and matching, probably even more than the Rays do these days. Is that fair? Or very similar? And I don't think Wallner's going to play against lefties, but he hits the ball so hard that if he's just up all year and playing against righties all year, 25 homers, I don't think is going to be a problem at all. Do you think he's too extreme for you, or do you like Matt Wallner as well?
No, I'm a Wallner fan as well. I mean, you just look at extrapolate those stats for a full season. He's essentially played half a season each of the last 2 years. And even if he is in a strict platoon, which I agree with you, he probably will be to a certain degree. But if he gets 450, maybe 500 plate appearances. I think 30 plus home runs, maybe not a safe bet, but a pretty good bet for Matt Wallner. My last home run sleeper, also a guy who has always hit the ball incredibly hard, Jesus Sanchez of the Marlins. But the home run totals have not really shown that yet. And he took that to a new level as far as hard hit rate goes last year. 95th percentile in hard hit rate, 93rd percentile average exit velocity, 83rd percentile in barrel rate. He's always been a guy who's hit prodigious home runs when he connects. His average home run distance, third in all of baseball last season. Strikeouts have been an issue for him in the past, and he still strikes out at a below average rate. But strikeout rate has dropped every year he's been in the majors. He's still just 27 years of age. Hits the ball on the ground a lot. He's going to have to fix that to a certain degree, I think. But Sanchez just feels like a guy who is due for a 30-plus home run season as hard as he hits the ball. I think he's going to play pretty much every day. He has had a problem with lefties, but I don't know that the Marlins have a guy that they want to platoon him with. I think they're going to give him regular playing time. They're even talking about giving him some action in center field. Hits the ball very hard, going very late in drafts. I know it's not the best lineup. It's not the best park, but he has the kind of power that I don't know that matters a ton. And as I said, still only 27 years old. I feel like we're due for a power breakout from Jesus Sanchez.
Yeah, I'm a Jesus Sanchez fan. He's somebody I drafted in Glarf yesterday. I had waited on outfielders, and I thought he gave me good power and maybe a bit of speed as well. Should mention, though, I was able to get him, I think, a little bit late. I didn't check exactly where it was compared to ADP because he is currently dealing with elbow inflammation. Sounds like he might not have to hit the IL, though. He might just be used as DH early in the season, so I was still willing to go for him. And of course, where he's going these days, he's well late enough that if it turns out he does need to miss some time and you have to even cut him, it's not a disaster. My final home run sleeper for today is Rhys Hoskins, who is coming off a sort of a down year, I would say, in terms of WRC plus. Just 100 was the worst of his career, and this is after he missed an entire season with a torn ACL. So it's been a few years since we've seen the best version of Rhys Hoskins, but you could say that, okay, we'll give him 1 year of being slightly off after missing a full season. This is his second year back from a major injury, should see a slight rebound. And also, he still managed 26 homers in 517 plate appearances last year. Rhys Hoskins has power, even if the batting average is going to be a liability at this point in his career. And to be fair, it was never good outside of a 50-game debut as a rookie where he hit 259. He never got above 247. But actually, 4 of his 7 seasons, he's hit between 245 and 247. So mostly he's a fine batting average guy who's not going to totally kill you, and he has real power. The strikeout rate did creep up a little bit to 29% last year, which again is another reason to think maybe we're entering the phase of his career where he's not a 247 hitter anymore. Maybe he's more in the 220s like the projections have him. But he's always hit it in the air very well, and that's given him consistently good barrel rates because he hits it pretty hard as well. Career barrel rate of 12%. He was just shy of 13% last year. So Rhys Hoskins, I think, is probably the final first baseman who I think can give you a very good shot at very real power. 30-plus homers. He's going nearly 60 picks after Ryan Mountcastle, who you mentioned, who I liked as well. After that, you're looking at, Andrew Vaughn and a bunch of part-time players. So I think, I don't think Carlos Santana has any chance of 30 homers. So if you were completely shut out of the early first baseman and you need some power, Rhys Hoskins, a viable enough option, I would say.
Let the record state, Erik is now 2 for 2 in mentioning Rhys Hoskins on our categories podcast. I didn't know that you were going to be the Rhys Hoskins honk on this podcast.
Yeah, I don't even think of myself as that much. I mean, I like him from his time in Philadelphia. And incidentally, I was checking out the park factor, the 3-year home run park factor for American Family Field, where he now plays in Milwaukee. It's 6th, 1 spot behind Citizens Bank Park. So he's got a good park, basically exactly as good as he's always had. he's a flawed player. He's going to hurt your batting average, but he's going to give you good power stats. So I think if you need those power stats, go for Rhys Hoskins.
They also really don't have much else at first base, and maybe designated hitter, maybe Tyler Black kind of cracks that rotation, but there's not a whole lot of. Jake Bowers is currently probably his biggest competition for at bats there. So yeah, I'm with you. I think Rhys Hoskins is a perfectly fine late power play.
Unless you are trailing in batting average, which is going to be our topic right after this message from our sponsors, starting with Fantrax. Fantrax is the most customizable fantasy platform in the industry, offering the greatest fantasy experience for your dynasty, keeper, redraft, and best ball leagues. Coming from another service, Fantrax makes it easy. Fantrax can import any of your current leagues and customize if needed. Fantrax offers the most in-depth player pool in the industry, including minor league players. Do you need a customizable commissioner service for your fantasy league? Fantrax offers more customization than any other platform. Waivers, categories, scoring system, schedule. Fantrax offers custom solutions for all that and more. And it's all free. Sign up for free today and be entered to win an official MLB signed jersey from Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Simply go to fantrax.com/rotowire and sign up today. That's fantrax.com/rotowire. Fantrax, the home of fantasy sports. We're also brought to you by Edge Boost. Have you ever had your debit card declined or had to call your bank at 3 a.m. in Vegas? Edge Boost is the first consumer-facing online bank dedicated to the gaming industry. There are numerous benefits to using Edge Boost. $250,000 per day in debit deposits, unlimited withdrawals, cash back on sports betting, DFS, sweeps, 100% approval for all gaming activity, financial segmentation for discretion and responsible gaming, compatible today for prediction markets, iCasino, DFS, sports betting, lottery, brick and mortar casinos, horse racing, and sweeps. No transaction reviews or account freezes. Visit edgeboost.bet today and use promo code ROTOPOD. That's promo code ROTOPOD. And we're back here to the Saturday edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast, taking place on a Sunday. Erik Halterman and Ryan Boyer here going over our batting average sleepers to end today's show. And Ryan, before we get into the names, what makes a good batting average sleeper to you?
So, first you're going to look at a low strikeout rate. A lot of these batting average sleepers, batting average specialists are not going to be guys who provide a ton of power. So you're looking at high contact rates. You're also thinking about guys that these are the instances that if you're in the position in your draft where you could use a batting average specialist, you prefer one that actually doesn't walk that much because their batting average is going to help you even more. Obviously, Luis Arraez is kind of the preeminent guy in that regard, but generally, people don't really want to be looking for batting average specialists. Luis Arraez is a batting champion 3 years running, and he's going currently at pick 173 in NFBC drafts. That just gives you an idea of it's not generally the type of profile that people want to be investing in, but if you're drafting the Kyle Schwarbers of the world early on, maybe you could use a batting average specialist late.
Yeah, Arraez is such an extreme option that I think in most leagues, like 3/4 of the team should not draft him because their batting average is already fine, and he offers only batting average. I guess he scored some runs as well, but you could very easily end up in a situation where if you drafted a normal team in terms of batting average and then you drafted Luis Arraez, you just have wasted batting average. You're 15 points ahead of everyone else, and that's wasted value. You get nothing for winning a category by a lot. I guess you get a little bit more certainty that you're definitely going to win it, but in the late months of the season, you're already going to know in some situations on a Luis Arraez team that you've gotten all the possible points in batting average, and it's early August. In trading leagues, I guess you can do something creative there, but Luis Arraez doesn't belong on most teams. But like you said, if you have drafted a Kyle Schwarber, I've certainly drafted Arraez together with Schwarber in the past. I think I did that in Glarf last year and finished second, so it can work out. It's just somebody who you really need to know your team and know whether or not you need him. I don't think any of the other batting average sleepers we named today are going to be quite as extremely one-dimensional, but some of these guys might get close. Although I don't think your first name should be one of those guys. Who do you got first here?
Yeah, he's also a guy who I'm going to completely contradict myself right off the bat and talking about looking for low strikeout guys and pick a guy who struck out at more than a third of the time last year and also batted 189. But Jackson Holliday, when he was regarded going into last year by many as the top prospect in baseball, it was mostly because his hit tool is just very, very good. He did play all of last year at age 20, now going into his age 21 season. If you look back at 2023, when he had that monster season, batted 323 in the minors, almost as many walks as strikeouts. And last year, as bad as his numbers were on the whole, still hit the ball pretty hard, 445.1% hard hit rate, as well above average. I don't know. I'm very confident that Jackson Holliday at his peak will hit for a good average. I don't know that that's going to be 2025. I mean, it's, as I mentioned, he's still very young, but if it does click for him this year, I'm very confident that he'll be a very good batting average asset. If you've seen, I don't know if you've seen the pictures of Jackson Holliday at spring training, he's jacked now. I don't know that that's not really necessarily what you look for in your batting average specialist, but he has a potential to do much more than that as well. Also talking about stealing more bases this year. So yeah, Jackson Holliday at his peak, I think he's going to be a very good average asset. Whether that happens in 2025 or not, I don't know, but he's going after pick 200. So now is the time to roll the dice and hope you get that high batting average.
Yeah, he may be jacked, but he's nowhere near as jacked as my first batting average sleeper, the most jacked guy in baseball, I think. Yandy Diaz does not look like a batting average guy, but at this point, we know that's who he is. There was a brief flirtation with efforts to lift the ball a little bit more a few years ago. He topped out at 22 homers in 2023, but was back down to 14 last year, but still hit a very excellent 281. And Yandy Diaz, as long as he's continuing to play all the time, he's gotten 600 plate appearances or more the last 2 seasons. He's projected to lead off because he's such a good on-base percentage guy against both lefties and righties, so he should really get you a high enough denominator, too. That's one thing to mention in the batting average sleepers here. Some of these guys are at risk of just not having enough at-bats. You know, if you hit 300 over 200 at-bats, you're just not helping the fantasy team that much. But Diaz, for sure, is going to have a very high denominator. So whatever he hits, 280 or whatever, that's going to be over a whole lot of at-bats. The last 3 seasons, 296, 330, and 281. The expected batting average is nearly as good, 288, 305, 277. Diaz does everything you'd want in a consistent, reliable batting average player. He makes a ton of contact, a 15% strikeout rate for his career, and he was right at that same mark last year. So doesn't seem to be losing that ability. And he hits the ball very hard. Even though he doesn't hit it in the air, he hits very hard grounders. And that's a way to run a high BABIP. He's got a 323 batting average on balls in play for his career. And the projections are pretty close to believing it. Steamers at 321, Oopsie at 319. So he's somebody who puts the ball in play a ton and gets more out of his balls in play than nearly every hitter. So Yandy Diaz, I think, one of the safest options to repair a deficit in batting average. You can get him around pick 190 in the month of February. Your next guy is the guy I have drafted a couple times already this season.
Yeah, Yandy Diaz, another guy who's going to benefit from the move to George Steinbrenner Field as well.
Yes.
I'm still waiting to see that televised Yandy Diaz Tyler O'Neill arm wrestling match.
Yes. I'm here for it.
That would be an interesting matchup there. But Ivan Herrera of the Cardinals, traditionally you're not thinking catcher when you're thinking of batting average sleeper, but he's going to get regular run at catcher this year for the Cardinals with Wilson Contreras moving to first base. And in 96 games at the major league level, Ivan Herrera has hit 289. That includes a 301 mark last year. He also had a 293 expected batting average, so he basically earned that batting average last year. And Erik, a little trivia for you.
Mm-hmm.
Hitters with at least 250 plate appearances last year, who do you think had the highest line drive rate in all of baseball? And I'll give you a hint. This is not a trick question. So go ahead and guess the guy that we're currently talking about.
I'm going to guess Pedro Pajes.
You're close. It's his catching compadre with the Cardinals, Ivan Herrera. 27%
almost had it.
line drive rate last year. Pretty impressive. So doesn't loft the ball in the air as much as you'd like. Hits the ball in the air it hits the ball on the ground quite a bit, but that is good for your batting average, and that's what we're looking for. Any batting average specialist, sleeper, whatever you want to say. I think Ivan Herrera does have the potential to be more than just a specialist. Certainly, I think there's a little bit more pop in there than what he's shown so far, but pretty good bet for the batting average, and shown that in the minors as well, to the ability to hit for an high average.
Yeah, I guess if Herrera does hit the ball in the air a bit more and gets a bit more pop, then maybe that comes at the expense of some batting average. But even then, I think he's still going to be a pretty useful pick. And if he continues being the same type of hitter he's been so far, he's definitely going to help you in batting average for a catcher, I would say, given the lower standards for that position. My next guy is Jung Hoo Lee, who we did not get to see for very long last year before he only played, 37 games before going down with a torn labrum in his left shoulder, missing the rest of the season. But he's already playing in the Giants' first spring game, so I don't think we need to worry about that issue carrying over into this season. So we get to reassess Jung Hoo Lee kind of like we did heading into last year. And I'm pretty sure that Jung Hoo Lee is a limited player, but still a very useful one. I think he's going to help you in batting average, maybe chip in with a few steals, depending on where he bats. If he's playing a lot, could even help you in some of the counting stats. As a left-handed hitter, probably going to be a little bit tougher for him to carve out a true everyday role, but we currently have him projected to start against both lefties and righties, so he may be able to do that. Jung Hoo Lee's main skill is extreme ability to hit for contact. When he was over in Korea, his last 5 years, his strikeout rate was 6%, 7.5%, 7%, 5%, and 6%. Just absurd contact rates. And you would have thought, okay, fine, that's great. But he was going against KBO pitchers. It's not going to be that low in the majors. Well, it wasn't that low, but it was 8.2%. You'll take that. And it's not like he hits the ball extremely soft either. A 41% hard hit rate is fine. Not a strength, but totally fine. Hits it on the ground a lot, so don't expect a lot of homers. But Jung Hoo Lee puts the ball in play a ton, has decent enough speed as well. Was 2 for 5 on the base pass last year. Didn't steal a ton of bases, but was regularly getting into the low double digits in Korea. So with the new base running rules in MLB, I think he could get there again. I'm looking at the projections. They're calling for a batting average between 271 and 293. I think if he continues to have a single-digit strikeout rate, I think Jung Hoo Lee is going to be much more closer to that 293. And, if you're taking guys who could hit 300, he would be very near the top of my list. He looks fully recovered if he's playing at the start of spring. And if he's going to play a ton, he's going to put the ball in play a ton. And I think Jung Hoo Lee will almost certainly help your batting average. Are you into Jung Hoo Lee, or did you got another guy?
I am, yeah. He was, I had him in one of our lists last week. I can't remember which one it was, but he was, as you mentioned, extreme contact hitter, and sounds like he's going to hit third against righties, at least initially. I don't know how much power he's ultimately going to hit for, and what he does hit for is going to be kind of thwarted by Oracle Park, but maybe he can have one of my favorite baseball stats of all time is the year that Tommy Herr of the Cardinals in the 80s hit 8 home runs and drove in 110 runs. So maybe that's maybe that's Jung Hoo Lee in 2024. But speaking of Cardinals, I'm going to stick with another Cardinal for my next average sleeper, and that's Brendan Donovan. Never had a strikeout rate higher than 15% at the big league level. It was at 12.4% in 2024. That was in the 97th percentile. His expected batting average last year in the 88th percentile. It was in the 90th percentile in 2023. he doesn't hit the ball incredibly hard, but the squared up rate that StatCast offers now, he was ranked in the 98th percentile. That's another area that like guys like Luis Arraez excel in. So maybe they're not going to hit it for a ton of power, but very good for your batting average. Where is he going to bat in the Cardinals lineup? He seems like an obvious fit for either first or second. They're probably going to bat Mason Wynn lead off again, it looks like. But I think Brendan Donovan, in their first spring game, he batted second. The other guy who was a candidate to bat second, probably Lars Nootbaar, I think hit fifth in their first game. So maybe Brendan Donovan hits second in the Cardinals lineup. Pretty good spot for him. Don't know that he's kind of a guy who just does everything kind of well, but doesn't really excel in any one area. I do think he could excel in batting average, though. And if he does bat second, he walks a lot, should score a ton of runs as well. But Brendan Donovan, at the very least, a safe bet for batting average who can be had pretty late in your draft.
Yeah, he could be had at pick 239 in February NFBC drafts. That's one spot before my guy, Jung Hoo Lee, who's going at pick 240. Among those two, if you're struggling for batting average and both of them are on the board, are you looking for Brendan Donovan or are you looking for Jung Hoo Lee?
I think I would probably lean towards Donovan. Just a little more assurance with Lee coming back from that shoulder issue, and also not much of a track record with Lee yet. But I like both of those guys in that price range.
Yeah, fair enough. I think I lean slightly Lee, but I'd be happy with Donovan as well. Somebody who's going quite a bit later than that, actually my last guys are all going quite a bit later than that, is Otto Lopez, who can be had outside of the top 400 this month. And I want to compare Otto Lopez to his fellow Marlins middle infielder, Xavier Edwards, who, let me just double check where he's going. Pick 140 about. So 260 picks ahead of Otto Lopez. Now, Xavier Edwards last year hit 328 in 303 plate appearances. Otto Lopez hit 270. So good, but nowhere near as good in 434 plate appearances. But if you look at the things that go into a batting average, strikeout rate is the main one, and they were effectively tied, 17.2 and 17.3%. So you'd have to say they're pretty much as good as each other at getting the bat on the ball, and Otto Lopez hit it harder. Xavier Edwards is a bottom of the scale hard hit rate guy. He had a 1.8% barrel rate, a 23.9% hard hit rate. Lopez isn't a power hitter by any means, but a 5% barrel rate, 38% hard hit rate. Those are within normal range, not an outlier at all. And that meant he had a much better expected batting average than Edwards, 274 versus Edwards' 252. Now, Edwards is going earlier because he's being seen as a very good steals source, and I agree with that. 31 steals in 303 plate appearances. But Lopez can run too, 20 steals in 434 plate appearances. That should give him a shot to threaten 30 if he gets 600 plate appearances this year. If you've got somebody who can steal 20 to 30 bases and has a pretty good contact rate, I think a 275-ish batting average with 25 to 30 steals, not a lot of power, but a lot of playing time in admittedly a terrible park and a terrible lineup. But Otto Lopez is as good at getting to first base as Xavier Edwards is, if not better. And I think the two of them should probably have a much smaller gap between their two prices. I think there's every chance that both of them just turn out to be not very good and lose playing time this year. And I'd much rather get somebody going, around pick 400 than somebody going around pick 140. So Otto Lopez, that is my third batting average sleeper.
Yeah, Lopez as well is rated out elite defensively last year as well.
Yeah.
So even if he kind of struggles a little bit at the plate for a bit, his gloves should keep him in the lineup. It's funny that the Blue Jays traded for maybe a defensive specialist. They're hoping that Andrés Giménez is not just a defensive specialist, but they used to have Otto Lopez before they let him go on waivers, and they could have saved themselves that trade and just hung on to Otto Lopez and put him at second base this year. I know it doesn't work out that way, but kind of a potentially a similar type player as Andrés Giménez. But my next guy, I'm going to go with Evan Carter, who let's just go ahead and throw out 2024 because it was definitely a year to forget for him. Had the back issues. He eventually underwent an ablation procedure in October to remove damaged tissue from his back. It sounds like the back issues might be kind of a chronic thing. He didn't really want to delve into too many details this spring when asked about them, but it seems like something that he might just have to deal with, which is kind of worrisome. But at this time last year, everybody was excited to draft Evan Carter, one of the top prospects in baseball, made a great first impression at the major league level in 2023, hit 306 down the stretch for the Rangers, hit 300 in the postseason as they went on to win the World Series title that year. Strikeouts have been an issue for him at the major league level, but they really weren't in the minors. 19.4% strikeout rate in the minors, along with a 15.8% walk rate. So I do think he'll probably get those under control at the major league level at some point. He has struggled mightily against lefties so far, but it seems like the plan is probably to play Leody Taveras in center against lefties, limit Evan Carter's exposure to them, which is going to hurt his counting stats, but as far as batting average goes, should help him. And as I mentioned, still a really young guy, top prospect. Everybody wanted him at this time last year. The back issues are worrisome, definitely over the long haul and short term. But if healthy, I think Evan Carter is still going to be a very, very good hitter. I believe his nickname is Full Count Carter, just because he has great plate discipline. And I think he could be a batting average asset moving forward.
Yeah, Carter fell all the way to the 22nd round in the Glarf draft yesterday. I think people were worried about those back issues and just sort of the vagueness of how it's being described. Earlier in the offseason, it seemed like it was okay, and now he's going to monitor it throughout the season. That's not what you want to hear. But if that means his price is dropping, if that 22nd round price is maybe where he's going to be now that we've had that latest update, certainly worth the risk at that point. If you have to cut him right away, a 22nd round pick, that happens sometimes. You can live with it. I've got somebody who's going even later than that, and that's Hyeseong Kim, the new signing by the Dodgers. You can get him at pick 412 in February NFBC drafts. And Hyeseong Kim, I initially, when he was being posted, wasn't convinced that he was going to have too much fantasy relevance. It looks more like a platoon, more like a utility player to me. But it seems like the Dodgers are set up to give him a pretty decent run at second base. They're also giving him looks at some other places. Seems like the plan is probably to at least have him be a very heavily used utility man, maybe, a 4 to 5 starts a week guy, starting at a couple different spots, maybe 3 at second and 1 at 2 other places or something like that. The Dodgers have been happy to have players like that, Enrique Hernandez or Chris Taylor. So if he could fill a similar role, playing a lot for a very good team, maybe doesn't get that denominator quite as high as some of those other guys like we mentioned. But when he's in there, we don't totally know how Hyeseong Kim's game is going to translate from the KBO to MLB, but I'm pretty sure he's going to hit for a good average. He's not quite in the Jung Hoo Lee territory of strikeout rates over in Korea, but the last 3 years, 15%, 12%, 11%. He's hit 318, 335, and 326 those years. Doesn't really hit for any power. He pounds it into the ground a lot. Topped out at 11 homers just last season, so maybe he's trending in the right direction, but I wouldn't expect much there. He's stolen 25 or more bags for 4 straight years and 20 or more bags for 7 straight years. So he's definitely has some speed as well. So really his counting stats are going to come down to how often he plays. And I don't know exactly how often that's going to be, but I'm pretty sure that when Hyeseong Kim's in the lineup, he's going to put the ball in play a lot, get to first base, and then try to steal second. I think he's going to give you at least a respectable batting average and probably a pretty good one. With help in at least one other category. So he's going to have to fit your team needs, but the price is so cheap that I think Hyeseong Kim is a risk worth taking this season.
I did find it interesting that each of Tommy Edman's first 2 starts this spring have both been at second base. I'm with you. I still think that they're going to put Kim at second base most days and have Edman in center field most days. So I wouldn't read too much into that yet, but it's maybe something worth tracking. Also would affect Andy Pajes as well. So that's something to keep an eye on. My last batting average sleeper, and qualifies as a deep sleeper. He's going even later than Hyeseong Kim at pick 418 right now in NFBC drafts in February. Jacob Wilson, the son of Jack Wilson, which makes me feel very old. Jacob Wilson last year in the minors hit 433, and that is not a typo, I'm not misspeaking. He legitimately hit 433 in the minors last year, 6.6% strikeout rate at the minor league level. You go back to his junior year at Grand Canyon University, I believe, hit 412 that year. He struck out 5 times his entire junior season in college before the A's used a first-round pick on him. He's an extremely limited player. I don't know if he would hit a single home run this year. He did show up to spring training, I saw, with a little more beef. So maybe he can get a handful of home runs. But you're really looking at him as you're hoping that you're going to get Luis Arraez with a better glove out of Jacob Wilson. And as I mentioned, he's going incredibly late. I don't think he should be picked in 12-team leagues, but if you're in a 15-teamer with average deficiencies, I'm perfectly fine with using a late-round pick on Jacob Wilson.
Yeah, Wilson didn't play a ton last year, only 28 games because he got injured, the day he debuted, I think it was. If not that, it was almost right away after that. So we didn't get to see him a lot, but I'm pretty sure he's just the guy at shortstop. I don't think Max Schumann or Daryl Hernandez or any of the other guys on the depth chart there are much of a threat to him if he hits like he can. And like you said, Luis Arraez with a better glove, it's absolutely possible. He kept that strikeout rate to 9.7% as a rookie. Did not hit a single barrel in 103 plate appearances. Had a 19% hard hit rate, so extremely one-dimensional. Well, I guess he can score some runs and he can play some defense, but extreme contact over power profile. But if you need that, I think Jacob Wilson is a steal where he's going in drafts. You said he was a late sleeper, a deep sleeper. I'll give you the deepest sleeper we've had yet in this series, and that's Masataka Yoshida. Now, right now, I don't know if Masataka Yoshida is going to play all that much. Currently, we do have him as the top option at designated hitter for the Red Sox. There's also a recent wrinkle that he is dealing with a shoulder issue, but he's expected to be ready for opening day, so I think he's going to be fine there. We just don't know exactly how the Red Sox situation is going to play itself out. For him to start at designated hitter, that would mean probably it has to be Rafael Devers still at third and Alex Bregman at second, and Christian Campbell failing to win a job. Also David Hamilton and Vaughn Grissom failing to win a job. So there's plenty of ways that Masataka Yoshida could lose his spot. It seems like the Red Sox would love to deal him away so that they could give some other guys some opportunities. I don't think Masataka Yoshida is necessarily worth his $18 million a year contract, but I do think he can hit for a high average. I have very little doubt about that. His 2 seasons in the majors, he hit 289 and 280, strikeout rates of 14% and 12.4%. He puts the ball in play a ton, doesn't hit for nearly as much power as you want, 15 and 10 homers in not quite a full season either time. But again, very high batting average floor. It's just the playing time, and there's 2 paths to playing time for Yoshida. One could be the Red Sox just decide their lineup's best when he's in it and they take a small defensive hit, keep the young guys down, and say, actually, Yoshida can really hit. There's a reason we signed him to a 5-year, $90 million contract. If that happens, he's going to be playing a decent amount for a good lineup, and he'll hit, he'll get some boost to his runs and RBI from playing with some pretty good teammates. I think if they can manage to find a trade, though, that's the true upside here for Yoshida. If he can find a team with an open DH spot or a team that's willing to use him in left field. I don't know He played just one game there last year, but I don't know if he's necessarily a total disaster who never can play the field again. It's just the Red Sox have better options. So if they can manage to find a team who's willing to take on, I don't know, half his contract or whatever it is, we could see Masataka Yoshida. There's still a path to him playing quite a lot. And if he does, you can get him at pick 5. Well, his average pick is 566 in NFBC this month. He's incredibly free. He's UT only, which definitely hurts. But as somebody who you can get late in a draft Champions League, just have as one of your many options, there are multiple paths to this actually working out totally fine for Yoshida. And if it does, you're just not getting this high of a batting average floor this late in drafts. Would you take a chance at all on him right now, or do you think there's just too much of a chance that he just doesn't get enough playing time to matter?
Yeah, I mean, at that price, like I got to assume that people are just, I guess, worried about the playing time that he's going that late, because I mean, he's a legitimately good hitter against righties at least, and sounds like the Red Sox, at least they're providing lip service to using him some in left field. The shoulder issues he dealt with last year, I know during the season they said it's purely because we have better guys for the outfield while Yoshida isn't playing the outfield. But then after the season, after he had surgery, they said, oh, it was his shoulder, actually. That's why he never played the outfield. So, I mean, he could play some left field, and Jarren Duran could move to center, and that they could make Ceddanne Rafael a super utility guy. Could potentially be another path to playing time for him. But yeah, a trade is probably in his and the Red Sox best interest, I would imagine. But I mean, it's, as you mentioned, there's a couple ways he could get that playing time. And if he stays and plays a little bit of left field, maybe he picks up that outfield eligibility at some point. So you're not just stuck with him in your utility spot. So as late as he's going, that's a no-brainer pick in a deeper league.
All right, that's going to do it for today's show. We've gone through the compilers last week and the one-dimensional hitters this week. I think we'll continue this series of mid to late round category sleepers next week. I think we'll probably do specialists. I think we'll probably combine stolen bases with saves. So keep an eye out for that next Saturday. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, listeners. We'll be back next week, and I believe Jeff and Scott will be up late tonight on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball podcast presented by Fantrax.